My name is Lauren Bennett. I'm 30 years old. I work as a freelance communication coordinator, which is a fancy way of saying that I help organizations tell their stories in ways that actually make sense to people. I help craft narratives. I help shape how messages land. I help give voice to things that need to be heard. It's deeply ironic, considering that most of my life has been spent in silence. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story I'm about to tell you begins on a Tuesday evening in my parents' dining room. The room itself is rendered in those particular shades of yellow that appear in houses where people are trying very hard to look like they have their lives together. There's a chandelier that was probably purchased at an estate sale in 2003. There are placemats that suggest a level of commitment to coordination that real life doesn't actually support. And there's a table set for 5 people, which is significant because the conversation that's about to happen around that table will eventually reshape my entire life. My name is Lauren Bennett. But in this dining room, on this particular Tuesday evening, I'm about to become someone else. I'm about to become a problem that needs solving. And the solution that my family proposes will stay with me for the next 3 months, setting in motion a series of events that I couldn't have predicted and couldn't have prevented, even if I'd known they were coming. My mother is Diane Bennett. She's 56 years old, and she has the particular kind of anxiety that comes from spending most of your adult life worrying about what other people think. She's wearing a cardigan that probably took her 45 minutes to select from a closet full of identical cardigans. My father is Frank Bennett. He's 59, and he's the kind of man who has perfected the art of not being present in any meaningful way, even when he's physically in the room. He's looking at his plate like it contains the secret to avoiding this conversation entirely. My sister Amber is 33 years old, and she is everything that I have spent the last 3 decades learning how to apologize for not being. Amber is loud. Amber is confident. Amber is the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately becomes the center of it, and everyone else becomes peripheral. Amber is successful in a way that makes people money. She runs a corporate communications department at a major insurance company. She's married to someone named Derek, who is handsome in a way that seems calculated rather than accidental. She has 2 children who are exceptionally well behaved, which everyone agrees is a sign of excellent parenting and not at all the result of a deeply authoritarian approach to child rearing. Amber is talking and everyone else is listening, which is how it has been since we were children. So, the thing is, Amber is saying, I was thinking about calendar logistics, and honestly, Lauren marrying Michael right now is actually perfect because we could combine it with our anniversary celebration. Same weekend, 1 caterer, 1 venue. Lauren's wedding could kind of be the opening act to the family's real celebration. It would save everyone a ton of money, honestly, and it would be so much simpler for relatives who have to travel. They could come for 1 big family event instead of scattering travel plans all over the calendar. She's saying this in a tone that suggests it's the most reasonable thing anyone has ever said. She's saying it while looking at my parents with an expression that communicates. Isn't this genius? Aren't I the smart sister who's thinking of everyone's best interests? My mother, Diane, is doing what she always does in these moments. She's looking uncomfortable in a way that suggests she understands something is wrong but is too anxious to actually voice it. She's moving her fork around her plate. She's starting to open her mouth like she might say something, and then she's closing it again. Perhaps, my mother begins carefully, we could have separate events? Celebrate both occasions properly? But she's trailing off because she already knows that this suggestion is going to be rejected. She's learned, through 30 years of marriage and 33 years of raising Amber, that there's a particular kind of force that comes with complete confidence, and that force is generally stronger than kindness. Amber shakes her head. No, that doesn't make sense. Honestly, I think having them together makes it more special. It's like family unity, you know? Everything together. One celebration of the Bennets. Plus, Lauren's wedding would be smaller anyway. This way, her day becomes part of something bigger, something that matters more. She's not even looking at me when she says this. She's not asking if this idea bothers me. She's not pausing to consider whether the bride might have some opinions about whether her wedding should be scheduled to coincide with someone else's anniversary. She's just announcing a fait accompli, the way she announced most major family decisions growing up. My father, Frank, is still looking at his plate. He's the kind of man who has learned that silence is a form of consent, and so by saying nothing, he's essentially agreeing with whatever his eldest daughter wants. I can feel something happening in my chest, something that's been happening since I was approximately 6 years old. It's the feeling of air being removed from a room. It's the feeling of being slowly photoshopped out of my own life. I don't say anything. Not immediately. I've had 30 years of practice in not saying anything when I should be saying something. I've had 30 years of practice in nodding and smiling and being the sister who goes along with things. I've had 30 years of practice in making myself smaller, quieter, less visible, so that my sister can remain large and loud and impossible to ignore. And then Michael, my fiancé, my partner. The man I've been living with for 3 years and the man I agreed to marry 6 months ago, in the most joyful moment of my adult life. Michael reaches over and puts his hand on my knee under the table. It's not a dramatic gesture. It's subtle. It's the kind of thing that only I would notice. But it's significant. It's his way of communicating. I see you. I notice that your sister just suggested erasing your wedding. I notice that you've gone quiet. I'm here. I'm paying attention. Michael Carter is 32 years old. He's the head of project management at a company called Northbridge Dynamics, which is a consulting firm that works with Fortune 500 companies on organizational restructuring and strategic communication. He's the kind of man who listens more than he talks, which means that when he does speak, people actually pay attention. He has never tried to make himself smaller or quieter. He has never apologized for taking up space, and over the 3 years that I've known him, he's been slowly, methodically, gently trying to teach me that I don't have to either. Amber, I say carefully, and my voice is so quiet that people have to lean in to hear me. I appreciate that you're trying to save the family money, but I'd like my wedding to have its own day. The room goes very still. My mother's fork stops moving. My father finally looks up from his plate. Amber actually pauses, as if she's checking her internal programming to see if she heard me correctly. But that seems inefficient, Amber says, and there's an edge to her voice that wasn't there before. I mean, from a practical standpoint, it just makes sense to combine them. And honestly, my anniversary is more significant. It's a milestone. It's been 10 years. Your wedding is just the beginning. It would make sense to... To what? Michael interrupts, and his voice is not angry, but it's very, very clear. To make Lauren's wedding a secondary event? To suggest that her marriage is less important than your anniversary party? I didn't say that, Amber protests, but she's looking at me now with an expression that I recognize. It's the expression she used to give me when we were children, and I did something that interrupted her being the center of attention. It's an expression that combines anger and confusion, as if she can't quite understand why I'm insisting on existing when I could just disappear instead. You kind of did say that, Michael says. You said that Lauren's wedding could be the opening act to your celebration. You're literally describing it as subordinate to your event. My father clears his throat. This is his way of trying to diffuse conflict. He doesn't actually have anything useful to contribute. He just doesn't like the tension. I think what Amber is trying to do is economize, Frank offers weakly. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with economizing, Michael says, as long as it doesn't require erasing someone else's important day. Lauren deserves to have her wedding be about her wedding, not about being an opening act to Amber's anniversary party. I watch my sister's face change. I watch the moment when she realizes that she's not going to win this argument through sheer force of personality. And I watch the moment when she makes a decision about how to respond. Fine, she says. And she says it with a tone that communicates. You are making a terrible mistake, and I will be monitoring this mistake closely to collect evidence that proves I was right. Have your wedding on a different day. Be difficult. See if I care. But she does care. And we all know that she cares. And the fact that she cares, and that she's willing to weaponize that caring, is exactly the kind of dynamic that has shaped my entire relationship with my sister. Later that evening, after we've left my parents' house, Michael and I are sitting in his car in the parking lot of a grocery store, which is where we tend to have our most important conversations, for reasons that I've never quite understood. Maybe it's because we're in a semi-public space where emotion feels more contained. Maybe it's because the fluorescent lights of a grocery store parking lot are the opposite of romantic, so we can talk about difficult things without worrying about performing romance. Thank you, I say to him, for speaking up. You shouldn't have to thank me for standing up for you, Michael responds. But there's no anger in his voice. There's just sadness. I shouldn't be the only person doing this. I know, I say. I've gotten very good at not taking up space. I've gotten very good at making myself smaller so that other people can be comfortable. My sister has always been the loud one, the important one, the one people pay attention to. And I learned a long time ago that if I just stayed quiet, I could avoid conflict. But that's not really avoiding conflict, Michael says gently. It's just absorbing it. You're taking the conflict, the fact that your sister is prioritizing herself, and you're internalizing it. You're making it your fault somehow. You're apologizing for your own existence. That's not fair, I protest, but we both know that it's accurate. Michael turns in his seat to face me directly. He takes both of my hands, and he says something that I will remember for the rest of my life. I don't need you to win against anyone, he says. I just need you to let yourself shine. When you decided to marry me, you decided that you were worthy of being seen. Not as an opening act, not as a secondary character in someone else's story, as the full, complete, important person that you actually are. And I know that's scary for you. I know that's outside of your normal pattern, but I think you're brave enough to do it. I start to cry. Not dramatically, not performatively, but quietly. The way I've learned to cry over years of not wanting to bother anyone with my feelings. And Michael pulls me across the console and holds me in a way that feels like the first time in my life that someone has actually made space for my sadness without also making it about themselves. When I was a girl, I tell him, I had a birthday. I turned 7 years old, and my parents threw a joint birthday party for me and Amber. We shared everything, the decorations, the cake, the attention. And I remember standing in a corner of that party, and the lights were dimmed so that they were focused on the cake. And I remember thinking, this is what I am going to be. I am going to be the darker version. I am going to be the one in the shadows while someone brighter stands in the center. But you're not her shadow, Michael says. You're your own person, and I think it's time you started believing that. I nod against his shoulder and I make a decision that I won't fully understand for another 3 months. I decide that I'm going to have a wedding. Not an opening act, not a secondary event. A wedding where I am the center of things. A wedding where I am the one being celebrated. And more than that, I decide that I'm going to make sure everyone in my family understands why that matters. Not through anger, not through confrontation, but through something much more powerful. I'm going to make sure they have no choice but to see me. The next 3 months of my life are consumed by wedding planning, which sounds like it should be joyful, and in many ways it is, but it's also tactical. And I'm becoming aware, as I go through this process that I'm not just planning a wedding. I'm planning something much more complex. I'm planning an intervention. Michael notices this immediately. He catches me at the kitchen table with my laptop open, scrolling through what I've labeled in my notes as the Bennett Family Accountability Project, though I haven't told him exactly what that project entails. "Are you writing another email to your mother?" he asks gently, setting down a cup of coffee that he's made exactly the way I like it. "Research," I tell him. "I'm researching something." He sits down across from me, and I can see the careful expression on his face that communicates he's trying to be supportive while also being concerned about where I'm going with this. "What kind of research?" he asks. "Venue research," I say, which is partially true. I want to make sure that whatever venue I choose, it's structured in a way that makes it impossible for there to be any kind of confusion about what event is actually happening. Michael leans back in his chair, and I can see the moment when he understands what I'm actually doing. He's not angry about it. He's not disapproving. But there's a particular kind of sadness that crosses his face, because he understands that I'm about to do something that comes from a place of deep hurt. And even though the hurt is valid, the path to addressing it is going to require me to become someone I'm not entirely comfortable being. "Lauren," he says carefully, "I want to support you having your day. I want to support you standing up for yourself. But I'm worried that you're not just planning a wedding at this point. I'm worried that you're planning a confrontation." "Can it be both?" I ask him. "It can be," he says. "But sometimes when we plan for confrontation, we end up creating exactly the kind of dynamics we're trying to escape." "I don't want to create anything," I tell him. "I want to be seen. And if the only way my family is going to see me is if I force the issue, then yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do." Michael doesn't argue after that. He just sits with me at the table, and he helps me research venues, and he helps me understand what I'm actually building, which is not just a wedding, but a boundary. A very clear, very public boundary. The venue I eventually choose is called the Sterling, and it's a historic ballroom that has been recently renovated. It has 2 separate banquet halls on either side of a central lobby. The halls are identical. They have identical capacity. They have identical audio systems. They are, in every meaningful way, completely equal. I book both halls. This is the moment when I turn to Michael and I tell him the plan. And I tell him that I understand if he doesn't want to be part of it. "Both halls?" he asks carefully. "You're booking both halls?" "I'm booking both," I confirm. "And I'm inviting everyone to my wedding. Officially. Directly. And I'm giving them a choice about which hall to attend." "You're not actually giving them a choice, though," Michael observes. "You're creating a test, and you're betting that most people will choose to attend your actual wedding, which is in Hall A. And some people, including possibly your family, will choose Hall B, thinking that Hall B is where the important event is. And then they'll realize they've made the wrong choice, and they'll have to live with that choice." "Yes," I say. "That's exactly what I'm doing." Michael is quiet for a very long time. He's not judging me, but he's thinking about whether to support me, and I can see him working through the ethical implications of what I'm suggesting. "I'll help you," he finally says. "But I need you to promise me something." "What?" I ask. "I need you to promise that you're doing this from a place of self-love, not from a place of revenge," he says. "Because there's a difference. And you deserve for this to be about reclaiming your own day, not about punishing your family." "I promise," I say, and I mean it. Mostly. The next part of my plan requires me to reach out to people who work in the events industry. Specifically, I need to reach out to Jared Cole, who is a sound engineer and technical coordinator. Jared is someone I went to college with, and we've maintained a casual friendship over the years, the kind where we like each other's posts on social media and occasionally grab coffee. I reach out to Jared on a Wednesday afternoon, and I ask if I can talk to him about a specific technical project. We meet at a cafe that's halfway between our offices, and I explain what I'm planning without explaining why I'm planning it. So you want dual audio systems? Jared clarifies. Two completely separate sound systems running independently in two separate banquet halls? I want it so that if someone is in Hall B, they only hear the background music, I tell him. I want them to have no way of knowing what's happening in Hall A. I want the sound to create a complete separation between the two events. Jared is nodding along as I explain this, but I can see that he's also putting together some context clues about what's actually happening here. Your family is kind of dysfunctional, isn't it? He says finally. What makes you say that? I ask. Because you're describing a technical setup that is essentially designed to make people feel uninformed and separated from what they think is the important event, he says. And you wouldn't be going to this level of detail unless you were trying to create a specific psychological experience for people. So yes, I'm going to guess that your family is dysfunctional. I don't deny it. I just tell him what I'm willing to pay for his services, and he agrees. The third person I need to talk to is Nina Park. Nina is a professional event coordinator who I've worked with on several corporate projects. She's smart, efficient, and most importantly, she understands how events work as communication tools. She understands that the physical layout of an event, the way people move through space, the way information is distributed, all of these things send messages that are just as important as the words that people actually say. I meet with Nina at her office, and I present her with a detailed outline of my wedding plans. I don't initially tell her about the dual halls. I just tell her about the first hall, the real hall, the hall where my wedding is actually happening. This is a beautiful setup, Nina says, looking at my notes. You've thought about everything, the flow, the timing, the way people will move through the space. I want to feel like I have agency, I tell her. I want every part of this event to communicate that I chose to be here. I chose to marry Michael. I chose this day to be about me. That's healthy, Nina confirms. That's good. That's... And then she stops, because I'm showing her a diagram of the second hall. Why? Nina asks slowly, are you booking a second identical banquet hall? Because I want to see who chooses to come to my wedding, I tell her. And I want to create an environment where people have to consciously choose me, not by default, not because it's convenient, but because they actually value me. Nina sets down the documents, and she looks at me with an expression of complete understanding. This is brilliant, she says. This is absolutely brilliant. And it's also kind of dark. Is it? I ask. Yes, Nina says firmly. You're setting up a test where your family is either in or out, and the only way to be in is to be in the right room. And the way they figure out which room is right is either by choosing you or by being publicly humiliated when they realize they've chosen wrong. I know, I say. And you're okay with that? Nina asks. I'm more than okay with it, I tell her. I'm relying on it. I need my family to understand that there are consequences to making me invisible. And the consequence in this case is that they might make the wrong choice. Nina leans back in her chair, and I can see her processing what I'm asking her to do. I'll help you, she says. But I need to be direct about something. There's a difference between standing up for yourself and creating a trap. Make sure you know which one you're actually doing. Everyone keeps telling me that. Michael, Jared, Nina, they're all variations on the same theme. They're all trying to make sure that I understand the difference between reclamation and retaliation. The truth is, I'm not entirely sure there is a difference anymore. The final part of my preparation involves reaching out to my contact at my fiancé's company. Michael's CEO is a man named Samuel Reyes. Samuel is 61 years old. He's run Northbridge Dynamics for 30 years, and he's transformed it from a small consulting firm into a major player in the organizational development space. But more importantly, for my purposes, Samuel has a particular kind of wisdom that comes from having made mistakes in his own life and having learned from them. I reach out to Samuel through a formal corporate channel. I send him an email marked confidential, and I explain that I'm planning a wedding event, and I'd like to invite employees of Northbridge Dynamics to attend, and I wanted to make sure this was appropriate from a corporate perspective. Samuel's response comes within the hour. He asks if he can meet with me to discuss the event directly. We meet in his office, which is sparse and clean in a way that communicates someone who doesn't need possessions to feel accomplished. Samuel listens as I explain my wedding plans, and when I get to the part about the dual halls and the test I'm creating, he doesn't interrupt me. He just listens. When I'm finished, he's quiet for a long moment. "May I tell you something?" he finally says. "Something from my own life?" I nod. "I spent most of my career learning to be quiet," Samuel says. "I learned to not speak up when I disagreed with things. I learned to be accommodating. I learned to make other people comfortable, even when doing so meant compromising my own values. And I did this because I thought that's what leaders were supposed to do. I thought that strength meant not taking up space. I thought that wisdom meant knowing when to disappear." He pauses, and he looks directly at me. "And then I lost important people," he continues. "People I loved, because I was too quiet to save them, because I chose to disappear rather than to stand and be counted. And I learned too late that silence isn't always kind. Sometimes silence is just complicity with systems that hurt people." "Are you telling me that my plan is complicit with a system that hurts people?" I ask carefully. "No," Samuel says. "I'm telling you that I understand what you're trying to do. And I'm telling you that sometimes the only way to make people see you is to make them understand that not seeing you has consequences. So yes, I will support your wedding. Yes, I will make sure that employees of Northbridge feel comfortable attending. And yes, I will observe what happens. But I will not intervene. This needs to be about your voice, not mine." And just like that, I have my support system in place. I have the technical infrastructure. I have the event coordinator. I have the CEO's blessing. I have everything I need to execute a plan that I'm still not entirely sure is ethical, but that I'm absolutely certain is necessary, because for 30 years I've been small. For 30 years I've been quiet. For 30 years, I've been the girl in the corner of the party while someone else took the center. And I'm done. The morning of my wedding, I wake up in Michael's apartment because it's considered bad luck for the couple to see each other on the day of the wedding, and we're not taking chances on luck at this point. I wake up early, before dawn, and I sit on the edge of the bed and I ask myself if I'm actually going to go through with this. The answer is yes. The answer has always been yes. I spend the morning getting ready in a daze of professionalism and deep breathing. My mother comes to help me with my dress, and she's crying, which she does at most significant moments in her life. She's crying and helping me zip up my wedding dress, which is white and simple and absolutely perfect, because I spent 6 months finding it and making sure that it was exactly what I wanted, not what someone else thought I should wear. "You're beautiful," my mother says, and she means it. But there's also something tentative in the way she says it, like she's not sure if she's allowed to be proud of me, or if my pride is somehow going to conflict with my sister's priority. "Thank you, Mom," I say, and I reach back and squeeze her hand. I'm not angry at my mother. I'm sad for my mother. She's trapped between wanting to protect me and not knowing how to do it in a way that doesn't require disappointing Amber. By noon, I'm at the venue. The Sterling is enormous and beautiful, and it's currently in a state of organized chaos that only Nina could manage. The floral arrangements are going up. The chairs are being arranged. The sound systems are being tested. Jared is in the technical booth, running through audio checks. I find him there, and I confirm. The system is ready. Hall A will have complete sound. Hall B will have only ambient music. People in Hall B will have no way of knowing what's happening in the real event. Are you sure you want to do this? Jared asks me, and his voice is kind, but it's also clear that he's asking the question seriously. Because once people start choosing halls, you can't undo it. You can't tell them, oh, I was just joking. Everyone's actually supposed to be in the same place. The humiliation is going to be real, and some people might not recover from it. I know, I tell him. And that's okay with you? He asks. It has to be, I say, because the alternative is that I just accept being invisible, and I can't do that anymore. At 12:30, the doors to the venue open, and the first guests start arriving. My heart is pounding in a way that has nothing to do with wedding day jitters and everything to do with the fact that I'm about to find out what my family actually values. The employees of Northbridge Dynamics start arriving first. Michael's colleagues. They've all received invitations to both halls, but they've also been given a memo from Samuel Reyes that suggests, very gently, which hall might be the actual wedding event. It's not explicit. It's not a direct instruction, but it's a nudge. And most of them follow the nudge and head toward Hall A. My extended family members start arriving next. My aunts and uncles, my cousins, people who I see maybe once a year at holiday gatherings, but who still represent my family identity in some way. And then my parents arrive. Diane and Frank. They're dressed beautifully, and they're looking slightly confused, which I attribute to the fact that the venue has two identical banquet halls and no clear signage about which one is which. Nina intercepts them at the entrance. Welcome, she says warmly, and this is where the technical strategy of my plan begins to reveal itself. We have an interesting setup for today's event. We have two banquet halls, and you're welcome to choose either one. Both have seating. Both have refreshments. Both will have a full event experience. It's really up to you where you'd like to celebrate. My mother looks uncertain. My father looks like he wants to defer to my mother. Which one is... My mother begins, and then she trails off, because she's not sure how to finish that sentence. Which one is where Lauren is getting married? Nina supplies, and she smiles in a way that suggests this is a perfectly normal question. Well, Lauren chose to have her wedding in Hall A, but the choice is entirely yours. I watch my parents process this. I watch the moment when they understand that they are being asked to choose me, explicitly and directly, without any pretense about logistics or convenience or family efficiency. My father immediately starts walking toward Hall A. My mother follows him, but she's looking back at me with an expression that's complicated. It's guilt and love and confusion all mixed together. It's the expression of a woman who's suddenly aware that she's spent years making choices that haven't put her youngest daughter first, and who's now realizing that her choices have consequences. And then Amber arrives. Amber is wearing a dress that's probably more expensive than my wedding dress, and she's wearing it in a way that suggests she's not quite sure why she's here, but she's willing to grace my event with her presence. She's looking at the two identical halls, and I can see her calculating. I can see her trying to figure out which hall is the important one, where the CEO is going to be, where the powerful people are. And then she sees Samuel Reyes entering Hall A, and I watch her face change. She doesn't even hesitate. She redirects her entire trajectory and follows Samuel into Hall A, and as she passes me, she doesn't say anything. But there's a particular kind of understanding between us. She understands that I've set a trap, and she understands that she's the one who taught me how to do it, through years of excluding me, isolating me, making me feel small. Hall B is nearly empty except for a few people who apparently didn't understand the system or who actively chose to be separate from everyone else. I watch people choosing. I watch the revelation that happens in the moment when people realize what's being communicated through the architecture of this event. And then I walk into Hall A, and I see my father in the front row, and I see my mother next to him with tears running down her face, and I see my sister sitting with Samuel Reyes while trying to pretend that this is completely normal, and I see Michael waiting for me at the end of the aisle. And I take a breath, because this is the moment where everything changes. The ceremony is beautiful. The vows are real. Michael and I stand in front of everyone and we promise to show up for each other, to see each other, to make space for each other's voices in the world. And as I'm making these promises, I'm aware that I'm also making a promise to myself. I'm promising to never again disappear because someone else needs the space. The ceremony ends. We're pronounced married. We walk down the aisle together, and I'm fully present in a way that I've never been before at any major family event. The reception begins in Hall A. There's music. There's food. There's the specific kind of joy that comes from actually being celebrated. But I'm waiting for something. I'm waiting for the moment when the confrontation that I've been engineering is going to reach its peak. It comes during the toasts. My mother stands up first, and she's not scheduled to toast, but she stands up anyway, and there's something in her expression that suggests she's made a decision about something important. I want to say something, she begins, and her voice is shaking. As Lauren's mother, I want to acknowledge that I haven't always been the advocate that my daughter needed. I've spent a lot of years trying to keep the peace in this family, and in doing so, I've sometimes sacrificed my daughter's visibility. I've sometimes made choices that made her smaller so that other people could be comfortable, and I want to publicly say that I'm sorry for that. The room goes very quiet. I'm sorry, Lauren, my mother continues, for not protecting you better, for not standing up for you more forcefully. And I want you to know that I see you. I see what you've accomplished. I see the woman you've become, and I'm proud of you, even if I haven't always shown that the way I should have. And then my mother does something I haven't seen her do in years. She starts to cry, but not quietly. She's crying with her whole body, as if she's grieving something, which I think she is. She's grieving all the times she chose safety over advocacy. She's grieving all the moments she could have stood up for me and didn't. I go to her, and I hold her, and I tell her that I forgive her. Because I do. Or at least, I can see a path to forgiving her, which is different from actually forgiving her in this moment, but it's a start. And then, my sister stands up. Amber is wearing an expression that communicates she's not happy about the direction this event has taken. She's not happy that the focus has shifted to my mother's regrets and my mother's failures. She's not happy that the narrative has become about what my mother did wrong rather than about celebrating my wedding. I think we need to be accurate about family history, Amber announces, and her voice has that particular kind of sharpness that comes from someone who's used to winning conversations through force of personality. Our family has always functioned best when there's clear leadership, when one person is responsible for setting the tone. And I think it's important that people understand that some people are just naturally better at being visible than others. Some people have stronger personalities. Some people are meant to be centered. And other people are better in supporting roles. It's a masterclass in not quite saying what she's actually saying while also saying it very clearly. She's saying, I'm the important one. Lauren is the supporting role. And everyone should just accept that this is how the world works. But before I can respond, Jared makes a decision in the technical booth. He patches my mother's microphone, the microphone from earlier, the one my mother was going to use before I intervened, into the audio feed. Not to the main speakers that everyone can hear, but to a monitor system that only my mother can hear. My mother hears her own voice. She hears herself amplified and broadcast back to herself in a way that's isolating and distorting and deeply uncomfortable. She hears what her voice sounds like to other people when she's trying to rationalize her own failures. She stops talking immediately. She looks confused. She looks around the room, trying to figure out where the sound is coming from. Jared cuts the audio. My mother's voice disappears, and then I step forward. I'm not angry. I'm not vindictive. But I'm very, very clear. I didn't come here to take anyone's day, I say, and my voice is quiet, which means people have to lean in to hear it. I didn't come here to punish anyone. I came here to claim my own day. To say, this is my wedding. This is about me. And I deserve to be the center of this. Not as punishment to someone else, but as basic acknowledgement of the fact that I exist and I matter. I look directly at my sister, and I continue. You taught me how to be invisible, I tell her. You taught me from childhood that there was one person who got to be loud and visible, and everyone else got to be the backdrop. And I learned that lesson very well. But I'm done learning it, because turns out I have my own voice, I have my own presence, and I don't need anyone's permission to take up space. My sister is looking at me with an expression I've never quite seen from her before. It's something like recognition. It's something like seeing me for the first time. What you did today, she says slowly, with the halls, with the test, with the... She waves her hand vaguely, trying to articulate what she's figuring out. With making us choose where to sit. That's manipulative. Yes, I say. It is. You would know about manipulation because you've been using it on me for 30 years. So I decided to show you how it feels. That's not fair. My sister protests, but there's something in her voice that's changed. There's something that sounds like actual vulnerability. You're right. I agree. It's not fair. Just like it wasn't fair that you got to choose whether I was visible or invisible. Just like it wasn't fair that I had to make myself small so that you could be comfortable. Life isn't fair, Amber. And sometimes the only way to create fairness is to do exactly what I just did. Samuel Reyes stands up at this point, and the entire room shifts slightly because Samuel is the kind of person who commands attention simply by existing. I want to say something, Samuel says, and his voice is calm and considered. I've spent most of my career studying family systems and organizational structures, and I can tell you with confidence that what I witnessed today, what Lauren did, was not about revenge. It was about boundary setting. It was about creating a system where people had to consciously choose to support her rather than just defaulting to their old patterns. He looks at Amber and he continues. No, and I can also tell you that I once made the same mistake you're making. I chose silence. I chose to disappear so that other people could be comfortable, and I lost important people as a result. I'm telling you now publicly in front of everyone, don't make that choice. Don't let your ego be more important than your sister, because you might not get another chance to choose her. My sister's face crumples. She sits down, and I watch the moment when she really, truly understands what she's done to me over all these years. The rest of the reception continues, but the energy has shifted. It's not uncomfortable exactly, but it's definitely different. It's more real. It's less performative. People are actually present with what's happening rather than just going through the motions of a typical wedding celebration. At some point during the evening, my father approaches me. He's been standing at the edge of things most of the night, and now he's looking like he's worked up the courage to have a conversation. I want to apologize, he says simply. I've spent a lot of years being quiet when I should have spoken, and I want you to know that I see you. I see what you did today, and I'm proud of you. It's not a grand gesture. It's not a dramatic reconciliation, But it's real, and it's direct, and it's more than I've gotten from him in a very long time. Thank you, Dad, I tell him. And I mean it. Later, much later, after the dancing has slowed down and people have started leaving, I'm sitting on a balcony overlooking the city. Michael finds me there, and he sits down next to me without saying anything. I hurt people today, I tell him. You were honest about what you were doing, Michael responds. You created a situation where people had to consciously choose you. That's not the same as hurting them. That's giving them information and letting them make decisions based on that information. But the way I did it, the manipulation of the audio system, the test, the dual halls, that's not kind, I say. No, Michael agrees. It's not kind. But sometimes being kind to yourself requires not being kind to the systems that have hurt you. Sometimes you have to shake things up so that people understand that the old patterns aren't acceptable anymore. I lean my head on his shoulder, and I listen to the city sounds below us. And I think about my grandmother, who I never met, but who I know had her own struggles with being seen. And I think about my mother, who spent decades trying to be invisible so that others could be comfortable. And I think about my sister, who learned from our family that visibility was finite, that there was only enough space for one person to take up room. The next morning, I wake up as a married woman. I'm still processing everything that happened, and I'm making peace with the fact that I handled it in a way that wasn't entirely kind, but that was necessary. My phone starts buzzing with messages. There's a message from my mother. I'm seeing a therapist. I think I've had some patterns I need to work through. There's a message from Samuel Reyes. Northbridge Dynamics has an opening for a project communication coordinator. Your approach to communication is exactly what we're looking for. Please consider applying. There's a message from my sister, and this one takes me a while to read, because I'm afraid of what it might say. I've been thinking about what you said, about how I taught you to disappear, and you're right. I did. I don't think I did it intentionally, but I did it. And I'm trying to figure out what to do with that information. I don't know if I'm ready to apologize yet, but I'm ready to try to understand. Can we get coffee sometime? I show Michael the message, and he's smiling in a way that suggests he knew this was going to happen. Your sister is smart, he observes. She's realizing that what worked for her in childhood, dominating the space so that everyone else disappeared, that system doesn't work anymore when she's competing with her own family member who's just as smart and just as determined. Do you think we can have a real relationship? I ask him. Or is this just her adapting to new information? I think relationships are always just people adapting to new information about each other, Michael says. And the question isn't whether the adaptation is real. The question is whether people are willing to keep choosing each other even after they understand what's been happening. Within a few weeks, I start my new job at Northbridge Dynamics. I'm working on communication strategy for the company's social impact initiatives. I'm working with people who understand that how you communicate something is just as important as what you're communicating. And I'm very, very good at this job. My sister and I do get coffee. It's awkward at first, but then it becomes something else. It becomes real. She tells me about her own struggles with visibility, with the pressure to be perfect, with the weight of being the good one in the family. And I tell her about what it was like to be the invisible one, and we start to understand that the family system that privileged her also harmed her, just in different ways. I don't know how to fix what I did, Amber tells me one afternoon, about a month after the wedding. You're not supposed to fix it, I tell her. You're just supposed to do differently going forward. And you're doing that. You're showing up. You're listening. You're making space for me. That's not fixing the past, but it's creating a different future. My mother continues therapy. She's working on understanding why she made the choices she made, and she's working on building a relationship with me that's not predicated on her feeling guilty or me feeling obligated to manage her emotions. My father joins a men's group at church, where he's learning to talk about his own fears and insecurities. He's learning that vulnerability doesn't make you weak, it makes you real. Samuel Reyes begins mentoring me professionally, and he tells me stories about his own family, about the relationships he saved, and the relationships he lost because he chose silence. He tells me that what I did at my wedding, creating a system where people had to consciously choose me, that's exactly the kind of bold communication strategy that the world needs more of. You didn't hurt people, he tells me. You woke them up. And sometimes waking people up is uncomfortable, but it's necessary. I'm learning to trust my own voice. I'm learning that it's okay to take up space. I'm learning that being quiet isn't the same as being kind, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is force people to see you. The microphone that Jared used at my wedding, the one that amplified my mother's voice back to her, that becomes part of a story I tell when I do communication workshops. I tell people about what that moment meant. I tell them about how sound can be used to create understanding. I tell them that sometimes you have to make people hear themselves before they can actually hear other people. Michael and I move into a house. We're not having children yet, but we're making space for the possibility. We're building a life based on visibility and presence, and the radical idea that both of us get to take up space without either of us disappearing. One evening, about 6 months after the wedding, I'm sitting alone in our living room, and I think about that 7-year-old girl who stood in the corner of the birthday party, watching the light focus on her sister while she stood in shadow. That girl is gone. I'm not her anymore. I'm the woman who chose to have her own wedding. I'm the woman who made her family see her. I'm the woman who used strategy and psychology and technical expertise to force a conversation that her family desperately needed to have. And most importantly, I'm the woman who learned that having a voice isn't the same as shouting. Having presence doesn't require other people to disappear. Standing in the light doesn't mean that everyone else has to live in shadow. I can be visible without making anyone else invisible. I can speak without silencing other people. I can take up space without requiring that other people make themselves small. These are simple sentences, but they carry the weight of an entire life. They are the kind of truths that you don't just understand, you earn them. One difficult conversation, one boundary, one moment of trembling clarity at a time. For most of my life, I thought visibility was something scarce, something that could only belong to one person at a time. I grew up believing that attention was a zero-sum game. If my sister was shining, it meant I had to dim. If my mother was fragile, it meant I had to stay quiet. If my father was distant, it meant I had to be small enough not to disturb him. I carried that script into adulthood, repeating it in boardrooms, in friendships, even in love. Until one day, I stopped. That day was my wedding. The day I decided to split the venue into 2 banquet halls and make my family choose which one to enter. It wasn't just an act of rebellion, it was an experiment, a declaration, a quiet revolution wrapped in the language of logistics. I wanted to see who would show up when pretense wasn't an option. I wanted to see who could love me without the performance. What I learned that day is something I keep coming back to. Quiet power isn't about manipulation, it's about clarity. It's about making space for truth to echo, about creating conditions where people have no choice but to listen. Not because you're shouting, but because what you're saying is undeniably real. The microphones, the mirrored rooms, the dual halls, they weren't traps. They were reflections. They were the physical embodiment of everything I'd been trying to say for years. That attention and love don't have to be competitions. That sometimes you have to show people what the system looks like before they can admit how broken it's become. Since that day, I've watched the ripple effects unfold like slow light through a prism. My mother has started speaking in sentences that begin with "I feel" instead of "you should." My father is learning that silence isn't strength, it's fear. And my sister, my brilliant, complicated, infuriating sister, is learning that visibility shared is not visibility lost. The calendar collision, the small domestic argument that once defined us, has become something entirely different. It's evolved from a fight about birthdays and attention into a kind of living metaphor. It's become the moment when one family decided to stop repeating old patterns and start building new ones. A pattern where visibility is abundant, not rationed. A pattern where everyone can be seen. My sister calls me one afternoon while I'm driving home from work. Her voice sounds lighter, steadier. "I've decided to do something different with the kids," she says. "Each of them gets their own birthday celebration, their own light, their own moment to be seen. I don't want them to feel like they have to earn it." I smile so hard my cheeks ache. "That's wonderful," I say. But she's not done. "I realized something," Amber continues, her voice trembling slightly. "I thought I was helping you grow by making you invisible. I thought invisibility would make you strong, that it would teach you resilience, self-reliance. But what I really did was teach you that visibility was something you had to take from someone else. And that's not strength. That's survival. I don't want to teach my kids to survive. I want to teach them to actually live." Her words hit me harder than I expect. For a moment, I can't speak. I look out the window at the city passing by, people walking, laughing, existing, and realize that somewhere along the way, our story stopped being about conflict and started being about awakening. Something real has changed, not just in my life, but in the entire family system. The invisible rules have loosened. The air feels different. It's as if the ground itself finally exhaled after decades of holding its breath. The calendar collision that was once about ambition and competition has turned into a story about visibility, about claiming space, about the quiet, steady power that comes from knowing your worth without needing to prove it. And for the first time, I understand legacy. Not as something written in wills or inherited in bloodlines, but as something we build through the choices we make every single day. My legacy isn't the drama of confrontation or the noise of victory. It's the stillness that follows, the space I carved out by refusing to disappear. I think about the 7-year-old girl who used to stand at the edge of every room, waiting for someone to notice her. She doesn't have to wait anymore. She's here, in me, standing upright, unafraid, unhidden. That's the legacy I'm leaving, not through anger, not through revenge, but through the simple, radical act of existing fully, through the decision to be visible without apology, through the quiet conviction that the truest kind of strength is the one that doesn't require anyone else to shrink. And as I write these words, I can almost feel her, the girl I used to be, standing beside me, blinking into the light. For the first time, she's not afraid of being seen. She's learning, just like I am, that the light was never meant to belong to one person. It was meant to be shared. That's what I learned when I stopped disappearing. Visibility isn't the opposite of humility. It's the reward of truth. And truth, spoken clearly, lived honestly, held gently, is impossible to ignore.